And thank you so much for all of your service to New Zealand, both inside Parliament and now outside Parliament. And also congratulations on what is a very nice haircut, mate, that you've had recently. And I notice these things, I really do. And I'm a great admirer of your hair. Should have its own social media presence, I think. And can I also say to Steve Jerkovic, thank you, mate, for your leadership of Kiwi Bank as well. He's a great CEO. He's also a good person on tour with a great sense of humour. I travelled through Switzerland and Denmark with Steve, and he's done a great job. And can I also acknowledge His Worship Mayor Wayne Brown and say, Wayne, it was great to be able to work in partnership with you, and I feel very proud about what we did a couple of Sundays ago around resolving Three Waters here in Auckland, and thank you for your leadership of this great city of ours. Now, kids born this year are actually going to turn 16 in 2040, and that's the year we will mark 200 years since the Treaty of Waitangi was signed and the bicultural foundations of New Zealand as we know them today were established in law. And more than previous generations, they are going to be grappling with a world bursting at the seams with both opportunity and also uncertainty. A global economy that's shifting its weight from the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific region, an increasingly diverse society with government necessarily devolving its services to communities best placed to deliver for their people, and families and businesses and communities being forced to adapt and evolve at pace in response to the often devastating impacts of climate change. And I just say to you all, it's an exhilarating time because the world is increasingly at our doorstep with all of the challenges and all of the opportunities that brings to our backyard. And looking out to 2040, I think our responsibility is to define the conditions that we want to leave for these young Kiwis born in New Zealand. And I just say to you that my vision is that by 2040, New Zealand will be characterised by three achievements: a much more dynamic and productive economy with higher living standards and more opportunity, a country where Kiwis return home in search of a better life, instead of leaving in pursuit of higher incomes. We want our public services defined, delivered and evaluated through the lens of social investment. Funding devolved to communities so that Kiwis can actually achieve their potential, leading healthier and happier lives. And thirdly, we want a comprehensive response to climate change where we see us both on track to achieve our ambitious emissions targets and resilient to the challenges of a more volatile world. And I think we've already taken some of those steps to achieving those objectives. We want to see on the economy, we're working incredibly hard to reduce inflation and to enact pro-growth policies and end the recession that we inherited at the end of last year. And on social investment, Nicola Willis announced just last week that this year's budget would include funding to embed social investment in the delivery of all of our social services across government. And so it's early days and there's plenty more for us to do, but in the coming months you're going to hear more from me about how we actually define and achieve each of those strategic objectives, what success might look like by 2040, and importantly, how we will get there. And I truly believe that New Zealand is the best country on planet Earth. I truly believe that our best days are ahead of us. And I think if we reach out and grasp the opportunities in front of us, and if we work together as government, business and community leaders, we can get there. But in the meantime, I'm resolutely and unapologetically focused on delivery. New Zealanders voted for us last year, I think, to do three things. They voted for us to rebuild the economy, to restore law and order, and also to deliver better public services. And I think we've already made some tremendous progress in our 165 days or so. If you just take our plan to rebuild the economy, since we came into office in late November, there's been a steady march of reform designed to unshackle business, to reduce inflation and to create the conditions for growth. We are giving business the confidence to hire by restoring 90-day trials and cancelling the compulsory union bargaining. We are dismantling what I call the obstruction economy, and we're introducing fast-track rules to accelerate investment and charting out a course of systematic reform on the RMA. We are ending the war on farmers. It started by cancelling the ute tax last year, but we're also now slashing through a jungle of red and green tape, modifying, delaying and cancelling a raft of rules and regulations, from SNAs, from freshwater to winter grazing and to slope rules. And we're also putting together an extensive infrastructure pipeline, eliminating the bottlenecks to growth that has been plaguing businesses across the country, but especially in our fastest growing regions of New Zealand. And that includes a transport program, as Simon, will appreciate in his new role as chair of NZTA, that gets us back to the basics of enhancing connectivity, growth, and also resilience. And then on water reforms, that's been about putting those assets back in community ownership and creating the financial freedom necessary to make those critical investments in local infrastructure on an ongoing basis. And as I said before, here in Auckland with Mayor Brown, those reforms that were unanimously endorsed by the council will enable up to $2 billion of investment in projects like the Central Interceptor over the next 10 years. So it is early, but we're seeing some promising signs of progress. Inflation has fallen to 4% from its peak of 7%. That is a 3-year low. We've seen food inflation has collapsed to just a 0.8% growth, with actually fruit and veggies falling in prices from this time last year. And our average mortgage rates are also slowly showing signs of softening, falling 20 basis points from their peak in October last year. And the recovery in business confidence since last year suggests that while conditions are difficult in the short term, the future looks bright for both the boardroom and the building site. And I accept that relief will not be immediate. Economic history and our own recent experience shows us that yet again, inflation has a way of sinking its teeth into an economy. And inflation, when it gets there, it starts to drive higher interest rates, it leads to slower economic growth and the rising unemployment. And unwinding those pressures has been and will continue to be quite tough. And when government puts its foot on the spending gas, as has been the case in recent years, that job just becomes that much harder. And so it might feel good at budget time, but I can tell you there is absolutely no kindness in spending up large only to see businesses close and families go without as a consequence of inflation. So it won't be a surprise that as we head into the budget and this pre-budget speech, the big job back in Wellington is actually getting government spending back under control. And even while the economy has stagnated in recent years, the size of the state has surged. And to give you a feel for it, in per capita terms, the economy is just 3% larger than it was at the end of 2017. But by contrast, government spending per capita has grown by more than 50%. And the result is higher taxes, more debt to fund the shortfall, and an economic engine that is frankly dependent on the interventions and spending decisions of ministers to maintain momentum. And I'll just say to you, no family would look at that growth in spending relative to income and describe it as responsible. So we're doing exactly what we said we would do. We're cutting the waste and we're restoring a culture of fiscal discipline. And late last year, we confirmed more than $7 billion of savings in our mini budget. And the public dividend came from cancelling projects like Let's Get Wellington Moving because it wasn't moving, Lake Onslow and Auckland Light Rail because they're phantom projects. And you'll see a lot more of that in the budget when we announce it. Last week, Minister of Finance Nicola Willis confirmed that the budget will in fact show that we have achieved our ambitious savings targets of $1.5 billion per year. And I do want to say and acknowledge and thank the departments and agencies who have delivered on their savings targets, because they have demonstrated through their action that better government doesn't mean bigger government. And those savings now mean that we can make some real choices. Choices to support lower middle income families with the cost of living, choices to reduce the borrowing and get our books financially and fiscally in order, and investing in the frontline services that Kiwis rely on every day, like health, like education, and law and order. And I acknowledge that that savings program has been difficult for those that have been impacted and affected. But above all else, the first priority of government must be to achieve the best possible outcomes for the money that we collectively spend on behalf of taxpayers. We want the best hospitals, we want the best schools, we want the safest streets. And those taxpayers deserve to be treated with respect. This year, we are going to deliver income tax relief to low and middle income working New Zealanders for the first time in 14 years. And I have to say, I am incredibly proud about that. That tax relief is going to be fully funded, as we said it would be in the campaign, from savings, from reprioritisation, and from new revenue measures. Now, why is that commitment to tax relief so important? Well, first, I'd say to you, because those Kiwis struggling with the cost of living, what I call the squeezed middle, deserve support. We were elected on a platform of delivering tax relief to those families, and I don't plan on breaking that promise. The second thing is, because inflation has actually dragged Kiwis into higher and higher tax brackets over 14 years, it's dragged family budgets backwards as incomes have struggled to keep pace with inflation. And as a government, we have a responsibility to ensure that we aren't just relying on inflation to do our dirty work for us on our government books and finances. Good governments, I believe, can compensate families for the impact of inflation and also deliver great public services if they get wasteful spending under control. And thirdly, the reason we want to do it is because there should be a reward for work. Kiwis work hard to support their families and their community, and our government believes that if you work hard in the best country on planet Earth, you absolutely deserve to keep more of your own money and what you earn so that you can get ahead. And you also deserve to see the best possible results for every dollar of tax that you pay, which is why a big focus of this year's budget is shifting money out of the back office and the bureaucracy and into the front line. And if you just take corrections, which we announced last week, an investment of $1.9 billion to keep Kiwis safe and deliver on our commitment to restore law and order, that's an illustrative example of what we want to see more of. That funding of $1.9 billion will make a real difference to ensuring that violent and repeat offenders are off the street, ensuring that more prisoners can access the rehab they desperately need to prevent future offending. But we can only deliver that scale of funding because of the $440 million in savings that was delivered across the corrections portfolio. And so how did they deliver those savings? And it's a pattern that you're going to see consistently across the budget this year. They went after making sure they had a more efficient back office, the right layers of management. They closed programs that aren't working. They started targeting funding at those that are, and they were focused on getting better value out of every dollar that we spend. They've actually gone through the 100 programs that they have and are reviewing which ones are working and which ones are not. And it's the same story in education. We know we have to hit the ground running early on education in our term. And the reason's very simple. Achieving better results for all of those kids that are waking up each morning and going to school, or sadly too often in New Zealand not going to school, is an absolutely a priority for me because it's got economic and social benefits to us. And as Prime Minister, I've now set two clear targets for the Minister and for the Ministry to hit. And that is that we want to see 80% achievement in reading, writing and maths at year 8, so our kids are ready to go for high school and knowing the basics well. And we want to see 80% of our students attending school regularly. Now, to all of you in the room that aren't up to speed with it, that might sound pretty straightforward, but actually delivering those targets is going to be a very big challenge because only around half of our students are actually ready to go for high school and are where they need to be in terms of their curriculum knowledge going into year 9. And we are well south of our 80% target. And more than half of our kids, over half of our kids today in New Zealand, don't attend school 90% of the time. And the problem with that is by the time they get to 15, they've lost 1 year's worth of education already. So it's not going to be a big surprise that we are making some big commitments on the front line in the budget this year in education. And so far, we've announced a $67 million approach to structured literacy, mandating that we will teach reading one way, same way, every way across the country to make sure we get our kids learning to read well. We're also rolling out $153 million for charter schools because we think the difference that those schools can make in lifting academic achievement among young people who need a different model is a good thing. And we're also making sure that we are really getting our kids ready to learn, maintaining the funding for period products and also for school lunches that was actually funding due to expire. And so you're going to see a lot more funding for education as a whole in the budget as well. But like corrections, we can only deliver on those commitments at the front line because we have achieved major savings in the back office. And like corrections, the education savings are significant. In total, we will deliver almost $430 million in savings in education over the next 4 years. And the vast majority of those savings are concentrated in the back office and the bureaucracy of the Ministry of Education. So unlike corrections, those education savings are dwarfed by the total increase in funding that we're making to the education in this year's budget. But the effect of those savings is to amplify the difference we can make in the front line, ensuring that every dollar we spend goes further. And I think that's what taxpayers expect. I think that when they go to work and make their tax contribution, they expect that to be used to fund classrooms and lunches and teachers, not the back office. So I'm proud that our budget delivers on that expectation, and whether it's in education, corrections, or a range of other public services, we are targeting your money at delivering the great public services and, most importantly, the outcomes that you expect. So in closing, I'm not expecting this year's budget to be a big surprise, and that's exactly the way it should be. We will do exactly what we said we would do. We will cut the wasteful spending, We will get money out of the back office and bureaucracy and into the front line. We will invest in infrastructure. We will deliver tax relief to low and middle income working New Zealanders. And we will make a virtue out of simply and unapologetically delivering what New Zealanders voted for. It's what we need to do to rebuild the economy and to beat inflation. It's what low and middle income families need us to do to respond to the cost of living. And it's what the government needs to do to get our financial books back in order. No bells, no whistle, just the basics done brilliantly to rebuild the economy, to restore law and order, and to deliver better public services. Again, can I say thank you so much for being here this afternoon? Really appreciate it. And with that, Simon, happy to move into any questions you may have.
Hey, well, great speech, Prime Minister. I do want to thank you for the compliments earlier on. I'd love to say I'm a great admirer of your hair, but look, let's keep moving.
Can't all be good-looking, bald men.
I mean, seriously though, I think one of the cool things you addressed there was, and I doubt there'd be to a person anyone who disagrees with you in this room, you know, a lot of spending over the last few years. Without the outcomes, and now is a time for restraint. I suppose one of the questions though is, do you think you're actually going far enough? I mean, it's about $1.5 billion in cuts. Crown spending is a fact for you, I'm sure you know, but maybe not everyone here does. In 2018 was $80 billion. Now it's over $145 billion from government. Are you going hard enough?
Yeah, look, so I mean, the first thing I'd say is I think we've forgotten a lot of economic history over the last 35 years. You know, there's a very simple economics lesson here, which is that if you increase government spending by 84% in 6 years, as the previous crowd did, that drives into domestic inflation. When domestic inflation goes high, you have to lift interest rates. When interest rates go up, that slows the economy down. 4 of our last 5 quarters, we've actually had negative growth. The economy's been shrinking, and now you see rising unemployment. So that is the history of economics, whether you like it or not, in any country from anywhere around the world. It's our own experience in New Zealand, and we're rediscovering that now. So good managerialism, good financial management, good discipline, which you can easily take for granted, has actually meant that New Zealand's been quite well served under successive governments until recently. So that's the problem that we're dealing with, and that's why in the short term, we have to focus everything on getting inflation down. If we can get it down below 3%, we can get interest rates falling, we get the economy growing, we keep people in employment. And that's sort of, in simple terms, what we're trying to achieve. The reality is, yes, you could ask, should we be more austere? And is this going to be an austerity budget? And the short answer is no. What we are not going to do is fix 6 years of economic vandalism in one budget. But what we are going to do is set a course and a discipline and a culture in place in the public service that we expect financial discipline. And what is different in our approach, which many of you in the room will identify and coming from a commercial world, you'll well understand, is that we're starting with the outcomes first and foremost and defining very clearly what we're expecting to achieve and deliver. And that is different from how people in Wellington are wired to think about budgets and headcounts and other things. And we want you then take the resources you're given and you reorganise your resources as you wish, but as long as they deliver those outcomes, we're good. And so that's why I'm holding the Minister and the CEO of the agency jointly responsible for those 9 better public service targets that I've identified that I want to see us driving towards by 2030. So, the reality is, Simon, yep, this budget doesn't solve all the problems that have been created in 6 years. That's beyond unreasonable expectation, but we are plotting the right course, and I think a good government should be able to do quite a few things at the same time. And that's what we're going to do. Make sure we get the wasteful spending out and get the reset happening there. It's not just a one-off. This has got to be daily practice and understanding that everything's about outcomes and what achieves that outcome. And then I think we can do tax relief to low and middle income New Zealanders. We're doing that in a responsible way, in a prudent way. There has been no increase. There's been no change or tax relief for New Zealanders for 14 years. If you think about it, and I know you were passionate about this when you were in Parliament, and you and I talked about this, some years ago. But if you think about it, many countries just index their tax thresholds to inflation each and every year. And the problem when you don't do that is what we've seen in the last 6 years is inflation actually helps the government books because it ends up actually being quite lazy, and actually government can leverage inflation in a very unhelpful and a bad way, which is what's happened.
Sell us the case for those tax cuts you've talked about, because look, in some quarters you've got flack because on one hand it's restraint, but then you can afford the tax cuts, and give us a sense of how we can afford them and why you think they are important for lower and middle income earners.
Yeah, so I mean, all the advice would be very clearly that if, what we've said that's different is we are not borrowing for these tax cuts. We have actually generated savings, which is going to some tax relief. It's also going to manage our fiscal situation. We've reprioritised, and we've also raised revenue in other ways. So our tax plan is fully funded, and that was always the goal, and that's what we articulated through the period of the campaign. And we also know that when you give people tax relief, some of them will put it into increasing, their mortgage and their equity and save the money, and others will spend it. So from an inflation point of view, it's a very efficient, good way of doing it, particularly when you've generated savings across the piece. So, there'll be a whole bunch of commentators and pundits that will have a whole bunch of views, and you've seen that over the last year and a half. But I'm telling you, when low and middle income New Zealanders are waking up at 7, going to work, working incredibly hard, doing everything right, the squeeze middle, and they can't get a break, that's not great. When you work that last hour on minimum wage and you're in the second highest tax bracket in New Zealand, that's not good. So we make no apologies. We are going to deliver that in the way that we talked about in the campaign.
What do we do to lift our, appalling, non-existent growth at the moment, and more importantly, lack of productivity? Give us a sense of because I know you've got it, a sense of your plan in this area and what you see coming ahead.
Yeah, I think that's the exciting bit, and that's where I'd ask the people in this room to come together and work with us on that, because as I've said before, I think there has been quite a parent-child relationship between government and business and government and community, and we need to move to an adult relationship where each of the 3 big actors in our society, community, business, government, can work on these things. Simon, I think that's the opportunity. We've had a productivity disease problem in New Zealand for many, many years under successive governments. And if you look at that, the ultimate measure is what's called GDP per hour worked. Kiwis are working incredibly hard, but we still can't get the jump to get more wealth and prosperity into the country, which ultimately affords our public services. So when you strip it back, we think there are 5 things that we have to do as the foundations to make New Zealand more prosperous, to have a better quality of living, ultimately, to get more productivity, as Simon said. And the first is we have to have a world-class education system. And I've been in politics 3 and a bit years, and I tell you, that is the thing that has worried me the most since I've come to Parliament, is the state of our education system. We benchmark ourselves to Ireland and the UK and the US and Canada and Australia, but honestly, when 54% of our kids are not at school regularly, that's a problem. Can't even get them into school. And then when 50% arrive at high school not at where they need to be, no wonder 13-year-olds that read like 9-year-olds don't want to be at school anymore. So we have to really go to work hard on education, and that's why we've banned the phones. We've put an hour of maths, hour of reading, hour of writing into primary and intermediate. We've got a full-scale refresh of the curriculum. We want a knowledge-rich, teacher-instructed curriculum. We are mandating there will be one way to teach kids to read across the whole of the country, irrespective of the school and the teacher, which is why we're going to train 9,000 teachers this year, another 9,000 next year on structured literacy, phonics, how we teach people to read. So education's key. Second thing is we have to embrace more science, technology and innovation, and it's a conversation I've had with many of you in this room, because we've got to get our R&D investment working for us to drive and create higher value products and services. And there's work going on in institutes, there's work going on in universities, there's work going on in your businesses, but it's often disjointed and it's not synced up. And so we have to look at that whole science, technology, innovation ecosystem. The third thing is we need modern, reliable infrastructure. You see the benefits of it, and the Waikato Expressway. I've said this before, but I remember meeting with a vet, and she said to me, Chris, I do 1 to 2 more jobs on farm each and every day. I've got more income because of that Waikato Expressway, which Simon built as Minister of Transport. And then she said, I can get home to my 2 little girls at night much quicker. It got social benefits. So good infrastructure is economic, social and environmental benefits. Big deficit across New Zealand, we all understand that, but that's because we actually have got problems with consenting and resource planning. We've got major problems with funding and financing, and then we haven't been attractive for people wanting to come and invest in this country. We are the second worst in the OECD behind Mexico in attracting foreign capital to a country. So we've got work to do there. We need to get rid of the red tape regulation. We'll have smart regulation, but we've got to get rid of red tape and ensure there's competition. And the fifth thing is making sure strong international connections to the world, more trade and investment. And that's why we're wanting to double exports in 10 years. but we also want to attract investment to New Zealand. So I think if you focus on those 5 things that as government, business and community we can work together on, that's how we change the quality of life in New Zealand. And there's no reason on the 200th anniversary of the founding of this country, we shouldn't be, the leading small advanced country on earth, period. No reason. There's no excuses. We're bang smack in the middle of the Indo-Pacific region. We've got really talented people. We've got strong social institutions. We're a modern multicultural country on bicultural foundations. And we've got everything we need, abundant natural resources. So exciting future, but we've got a bit of work to dig ourselves out of the hole around inflation in particular. And then we've all got to focus on driving for growth and economic productivity.
Absolutely. I think I always get told off I ask too many of my questions and not their questions, Prime Minister. So let's go to a couple here, and they are infrastructure. I didn't write them. How are you going to address the staggering infrastructure deficit in future years? And if we roll the other one there into this, and what are your priorities as a government around infrastructure, let's say over the next 3 years?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work going on in infrastructure to get that modern, reliable infrastructure pillar of productivity right. We still run the country like it's 1975. We still, roam around the back of the couch, find some cash, fix up 3 waters for Wayne in Auckland. He's doing the same thing at a council level, when in fact, Wayne and I have put in place, a more sophisticated funding and financing mechanism that gives investors certainty about projects, but also importantly gives them, we've actually got different ways to access that. So I'm focused on resource planning and consenting. That's why you're seeing the fast track where we repealed RMA 2.0 before Christmas, put fast track in place, and by the middle of next year have an alternative RMA regime in place. But where there are projects of national or regional significance that enable more houses, more roads, or more productivity, that's a good thing. We are very focused on making sure we open up funding and financing tools. So that will be taking Crown infrastructure partners, essentially creating a national infrastructure agency that can then contract essentially with private capital, whether it's in New Zealand or international capital. And then we've got to be able to make sure it's an attractive place for people to want to come and invest in this country. So I think the challenge on infrastructure is it's been very ad hoc, very tactical, and what we really want to see is a 30-year pipeline of well-defined projects, not post-it notes and stickers and headlines, but actual proper projects. We need to see 10-year city and regional deals, and then we need a national infrastructure agency. And that way we can get round and have the scaffolding in place that gets us a long-term view on infrastructure development through the political cycles.
Fantastic. Let's roll a couple more together here. One from Ms. Anonymous. New data by Pharmac shows that 230,000 Kiwis are missing out on waitlisted medicines. Will the budget put a dent in the waitlist and bring hope to cancer patients? And then look, another one, at level maybe related. What's the one key thing from Timothy here you would have liked to put in the budget that you couldn't?
Well, firstly, on the healthcare front, I'd just say we are going to be investing a lot more in healthcare. So expect health and education and law and order to have more money at the front line. On Pharmac in particular, on drugs in particular, our challenge there is that we are very slow at registering new drugs. I think it takes us 2.5 years sometimes to do what takes the UK and Australia 6 months. And so we are very interested, we've got ideas about how we can put some pressure into the system to make sure we get drugs that are consented in other places, get them consented here much quicker as a result. But yes, there'll be more money going into the health budget. The one thing that we want to do more of, look, I mean, I'm actually really pleased with what we've got delivered. I think we've got the balance right. We could throw the whole country into austerity, and I just don't think that would be a good thing. We can't carry on the way that we've been going. I think we've found a third way through where we can actually get the balance right of that investment in frontline services, get the bureaucracy down, and then have a plan for the future. So I'm comfortable where we are.
There's a good question there from Mary Losey. The Pacific region is important to New Zealand. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a statement regarding aid. Is the government looking to expand its Pacific aid program? And let's just abstract that a bit higher as well. I know you've got a real vision on the international. You're spending a lot of time on this. You've just been ASEAN countries. I know you've got a very busy schedule in the second half of the year. Give us a sense of why that's not a junket. Look, that's really important to New Zealand, what you as Prime Minister are leading there.
Yeah, look, I mean, the reality is that we have a foreign policy reset going on, and it is to focus things in the Indo-Pacific region. We are always going to have an independent foreign policy that is about acting in New Zealand's national interests, and that means our national interests actually sit in that Indo-Pacific region. And we need to understand that our security interests and our economic interests are now interdependent. You can't profess certain values and not actually stand up for them. But equally, if we don't have a peaceful, stable, secure region, we then don't have the conditions in place for economic prosperity. And if we don't have economic prosperity, it creates instability, which creates security risk as well. So those two issues are very much joined up. But we do want to double the amount of exports that we have coming out of New Zealand in the next 10 years. And that's why you've seen us focus on the initial relationship with Australia. We are deeply committed to continuing our partnering within the Pacific. And with an answer to the question, I think about 60% of our aid is now directed towards the Pacific Island nations. And then we've actually got a big growth agenda in Southeast Asia, India, Northeast Asia, and obviously China, continuing our trading relationships and opportunities there as well. So that's in our economic and our security interests, which ultimately adds up to our national interests that we'll continue to push forward on. And when you see 1 in 4 of our jobs in New Zealand are actually tied to trade, it's really important we're out there in the world hustling, that we're relevant, that we're at the table in those regional conversations politically, but we're also doing the business economically. And that's why it was great to go through Singapore, Thailand, the Philippines, and look at the opportunities just in those ASEAN countries. I've hosted the Prime Minister of Vietnam here in New Zealand. We'll do Malaysia and Indonesia later in the year. We'll have also got trips to Japan and obviously India coming up through the course of this year as well. So between myself, between Winston Peters on Foreign Affairs, Judith Collins on Defence and Todd McClay on Trade, we are acting as a foursome at the sharp end of the spear to lift the urgency and intensity to make sure that New Zealand stays relevant in a security and an economic sense in the region. So expect us to be doing more of this. And when we go on tour as New Zealand Inc., as business folk, community folk, government folk coming together. So many of you in the room hopefully will come and join us.
Yeah, the feedback, Prime Minister, is that you are at your absolute best, hustling it on the world stage, and so we look forward to more of it. I'm going to ask you 2 more quick questions because they're up here, and I reckon they're really good. It's allied to what we've just heard. We've seen you putting another $500 million in defence. That's really just to pay the boys and girls in the military. Are we going to see more of that, given what you've said, that actually security and economy, they're interrelated in this modern world?
Yeah, look, we need to lift our defence spending because you can espouse values in a verbal sense as much as you like, but you've actually got to follow it through with some commitments. And so, we are a country that stands up for the international rule of law. We believe in the freedom of navigation. We're a small trading nation out there in the world, and we need that to be working for us. And so, frankly, when the Houthis are attacking ships in the Red Sea, we've put 6 of our defence staff into there to make sure that we are demonstrating our commitment to that. So yes, we would like to lift our defence spending. The challenges we've got, as you know, are challenged at the moment fiscally. We're in a process where we're actually changing all of the leaders of the military agencies, Air Force, Army, Defence. Just yesterday we announced a new Chief of Defence, and that's all happening in the next couple of months. And then there's also a capability review going on. And a big part of that conversation is, how do we have greater interoperability with Australia? How do we become a force multiplier to the Australian assets as well? And so I want those 2 things done over the course of the year, where we have new leadership committed to a new review and strategy, and then we can get funding flowing from there.
And look, just an easy one for you to finish things off. We've heard a lot about back to basics, no frills, restraint, not austerity. We I think, agree with that. But what I think people also are looking for is a plan, a sense of vision. And there was one there that's just gone, but it was, as I say, an easy one for you. What's your vision for the next 20 years? Yeah,
well, look, I would love us on 2040, on the 200th anniversary of New Zealand, to actually be one of the leading advanced small countries on earth, period. And for that to happen, we have to build a much more productive economy that gives us a bigger economic engine. We have to make sure that we are putting social investment as our underpinning intellectual thoughts into the delivery of our social services so that we're actually supporting our people. And we also need to make sure that we are delivering on our climate change commitments and goals and emissions reductions as well. So I think if you think about it, economic productivity is at the heart of all our economic policies. We need social investment at the heart of all our social policies, and we need emissions reduction at the heart of all our climate policies. And if we can do those 3 things, yes, this initial 3-year period is rebuild the economy, restore law and order, deliver better health and education. But we've got to build out that growth agenda that we talked about to get to that vision by 2040. And we can do it. Honestly, we can do it. This is the best country on earth. We have everything going for us. And it's about us turning our mindset around, getting out there with some ambition and some aspiration, celebrate excellence, get out there and hustle and give it a go, and get this show on the road. And so I know we can do it. We won't do it all in government. Government can set the operating system up and the riverbanks and the way we get things set up. Businesses like yourselves get out there and actually execute with speed and scale and execute well. And our community organisations see the pain, the hurt, the need, the frustration, and are really good at making sure they can deliver for our people who are most needed. So I'm really excited about the future. And I'm 165 days into this thing, and I've got to tell you, that's our goal. We have a fantastic future as New Zealand. We now have to get ourselves out of a hole a bit, and we can take those tough decisions, but that's what we're all striving for.
I think we've heard you on the budget, your immediate priorities, but also a sense of your plan, your vision over time and our place in the world. As you say, the greatest little country in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Right Honourable Christopher Luxon.
Thanks, much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's us today. Thank you so much for coming along. I just want to thank once again Kiwibank, fastest growing commercial bank lender in New Zealand, a bank with SMEs at its heart, and you for coming along. Once again, Prime Minister, thank you. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Simon Bridges, he said that one form of reading will be taught across the country. Except that's not quite right, is it? Because charter schools, as we found out yesterday, will be able to teach whatever they want.
Yeah, look, with respect to charter schools, which we want to see a lot more of them in the New Zealand education system. Why? Because they actually, they serve a need for helping kids get educated that may be failing or not working in the mainstream system. They'll actually be held to, have more autonomy, but the quid pro quo is they get more accountability as a result. And, as long as they deliver the academic achievement results that we agree with them in the contract process, that they can make their own decisions. But beyond that, we're making sure that, mobile phones are banned across schools. We're making sure there's a common approach to state schools around structured literacy.
You also talked in the Q&A about Pharmac lagging, the timeframes to approve drugs lagging against other countries like Australia and the United Kingdom. Would you consider doing, as people at the Cancer Society and others have called for, fixed timeframes for Pharmac to approve drugs? Look,
there's a lot of interest in a number of areas about how we actually make sure that we register drugs quicker in New Zealand. Obviously, there's a separate conversation about how we fund them, but we're looking at all sorts of options to make sure that we can get that done.
So you are considering fixed timeframes for Pharmac to approve?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that now. I'm just saying to you. Well, yeah, but what I'm saying to you is we're recognising we've got a problem, which is that we're very slow at registering new drugs that are available in other jurisdictions around the world. We're looking very closely at how we can speed that up.
Just on Pharmac as well. Where are you at with the 13 cancer drugs that were promised pre-election? That promise hasn't been fulfilled, and one terminal patient is paying $100,000 a year for lung cancer treatment that the government has promised to fund.
Yeah, look, I mean,
when will they get?
well, the first thing I'd say is you are going to see more funding for health in our budget, as I've talked about and Nicola has talked about in quite a lot of detail recently. We're increasing funding for health, education, law and order. That's going to be very obvious. We still have an ambition and a desire to make sure we can get more access to cancer drugs. There have been 2 that have been, I think, released since we've come to government already. That's been good. You've seen us actually talk about cancer targets in place. A lot of that will be actually the drugs that will support the delivery of those targets. But we'll have more to say about that in the future.
The 13 drugs, though, that
Yep.
you campaigned on.
Yes.
Will there be some certainty in this year's budget?
Again, you'll have to wait for the budget, but we are committed to that. We've just still got a lot to work through as we go through.
Will it be this year?
I'm not going to talk about what's in the budget.
People are spending hundreds of thousands
I get it.
of
No,
dollars and they want some certainty.
Yes, they do, and it's been horrific what we've seen in the healthcare system, where outcomes have gone backwards after the last 6 years. We're working incredibly hard to make sure that we make cancer one of our core healthcare targets, which Shane Reddy has spoken to. You've seen a number of initiatives already about expanding breast cancer screening to 74. You've seen us, as I said, I think there's been 2 new drugs that have been approved and are now available. We want to know, we know there's more cancer drugs we've got to get into the system. We'll have more to say about that in the coming months.
Funding, wasn't it, from the getting rid of free prescriptions? So was there a shortfall when you did that in terms of the
Again, I'm sorry, but you're preempting a lot of budget conversations, and you'll have to wait till that.
You were talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that you were going to ring fence for cancer drugs. You promised it on the election campaign. So was there a shortfall when you got rid of free prescriptions?
We're committed to making sure we get more cancer drugs. We'll have more to say about that in coming months.
A group of Māori providers have filed legal proceedings against the government at the High Court for disestablishing the Māori Authority. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, they're free to do what they want to do. We've already made the decision as a government that we're disbanding the Māori Health Authority. That's what we have done. Our model, as we've said in opposition and we've also said in government, is that we believe in improving outcomes for Māori. They went backwards under the previous administration. We actually think there's better ways of delivering. You've seen us do that already, targeting under 2-year-olds for immunisations, working with Māori health providers, believing that they're best to deliver and deliver those improved outcomes. We'll continue to do more of that.
And do you think the fears that about the disparities within the health system towards Māori and Pacifica is justified?
Yes, I mean, there are disparities across our system, but the point is that's not the way to deliver those improved outcomes. As you saw, there was a huge investment in bureaucracy, a pretty damning report 12 to 15 months down the road that the Māori Health Authority wasn't well governed, well functioned, didn't have a clear operating model. That's not the way in which we deliver improved outcomes. You can disagree with us on that, but it's very clear for us. We think there's a better way for delivering, and that is partnering with community organisations, iwi organisations, to deliver those outcomes.
When choosing the 9 big government targets for
Yesterday we had the National Gang Unit announced, but I'm wondering, can you fully commit to funding it, given there was no money attached to the announcement yesterday?
Well, again, what I'd say to you, we are committed to restoring law and order in this country. A big part of it is cracking down on gangs. Gang members want all the rights of being Kiwis. They're not prepared to take the responsibilities. You know, they peddle a lot of misery and suffering and pain for their fellow Kiwis. We're over that. We're giving the police the tools that they need, whether it's the 500 more police officers in the next 2 years. We've obviously got our gang laws coming through the Parliament at the moment, and you saw the announcement from the Police Commissioner. So we'll be making sure we're cracking down on gangs and that police have the resources they need to do exactly that job.
So that's a yes to fully funding it?
Well, again, we'll make sure that police have the resources they need to get this job done. We're working in a different way, and I think, you know, I appreciate it's taking people time to understand the way we're working, which is we are focused on outcomes and results, and how people organise resources to deliver those outcomes. That's what we want them to do.
While we're on law and order,
Yeah.
the New South Wales Premier has just held a press conference saying that they want to remove red tape over there to bring over more Kiwi cops to combat the knife crime problem that they've got there. What are you going to do to stop them?
Well, look, again, you know, what we are doing is making sure we build out a great economy that can actually afford better public services and better pay for people in our public services. But we have to acknowledge Australia as a country and New South Wales as a state that's probably 30% wealthier than New Zealand. And so their average income is a lot higher than the average income in New Zealand. That's why we're working incredibly hard to rebuild the economy. Having said that, we're also, we found an extra $250 million over the Labor Administration to put into police pay. I think police attrition rates are running at about 4.6% at the moment. That's up for each individual police officer to make their decision. But I just say to you, we are wanting to build a country where police officers choose to stay here because they think it's a great place to work, but more importantly, a great place to raise a family.
When choosing the 9 big government targets for 2030, why did you decide not to set targets in reducing inflation or increasing child immunisation and housing supply?
Well, again, what those are is as outcomes on better public service targets with respect to social services and the environment. We have a set of obviously economic goals that we're working towards, or we want to make sure that we're driving more productivity into New Zealand in particular. But they're the big ultimately outcomes that we want to see emerge in our public services. There's a whole bunch of other things that feed into those public service targets and goals, and how we work it inside our government. Just to give you a sense of the processes, I chair something called the Strategy Committee. We discuss those targets. We bring in the Minister and the CEO. We've already had one of those sessions in the education space on the 2 targets there, and then that forces us to have conversations about, well, what else is actually feeding into that result? What else do we need to do differently? What evidence have we got that program's working, we should scale it up, or that one's not working and we should knock it off.
If the US bans TikTok, what will that mean for New Zealand?
Oh, look, hasn't been something I've thought about at this point.
Would New Zealand consider banning TikTok?
Again, I haven't thought about it.
Does New Zealand believe, based on our intelligence, that TikTok's data or algorithms are being passed on or accessed or manipulated by the Chinese Communist Party?
Again, look, I've got no comment on that. It's not something I've been briefed on. Sorry?
Isn't that something we should be looking at though and should be worried about?
Well, we have a set of protocols that we use. I'm on TikTok myself, but I have a set of protocols around that to make sure that we're managing our information securely and that there is no risk there. But what I'd say to you is it's not something we've had a discussion about.
How do you do that when TikTok's been banned on all government devices?
Again, we follow the advice that we've had on how to do it. I'm not getting into that, but we follow the protocols and the advice. Rest assured, we've followed the advice right from day one, and we've got protocols in place to make sure we manage it.
What about the impact that TikTok and other social media apps are having on young people? When, as a parent, were you quite strict on your kids' access to social media when they were growing up?
Yeah, we were. I mean, we sort of had some constraints around gaming and around social media platforms and computer time, a limit per week, and that's how we kind of worked it in our family. I appreciate each family's different.
Are we supporting US calls for ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, to be sold?
Again, that's not a conversation that I've had or been briefed on particularly.
On the changes
I'm aware of the conversation in the US, but it's not something we've discussed here in New Zealand.
Following it though?
I've been following it a little bit, yep.
On the changes to the Christchurch call, was that a decision made by you and your government, or was it made by Chris Hipkins, given the meeting that was held in November before the coalition?
Look, I mean, before I formally was announced as Prime Minister or formed a government, Jacinda Ardern and I had a conversation. She was heading into a Christchurch call meeting in November. We both had a very constructive, good conversation about saying, hey, listen, it's 5 years down the road. Actually, it's got good buy-in from other governments, from tech companies and civil society society organisations, and it's only natural that it evolves to an independent foundation kind of model and status. That was then discussed at that meeting in Paris in November as well, and that's why I think what we've got to is a really good outcome. You know, the reality is the work on violent extremist content online is ongoing, difficult work. There's been some very good work that's happened under the Christchurch call, but it's entirely appropriate that it moves to an independent foundation status now.
What's your pathway towards getting towards a more, I think you want to be the best small advanced economy in the world, but
Yeah.
you would have to grow faster than other small economies in Western Europe, plus, you know, other countries like Singapore.
Well,
how are you going to achieve that?
Well, that's why I came to politics, because, you know, 3 years ago, I think this country has tremendous potential, and we can realise a lot more of it. And that's the conversations that I have with community leaders, that's the conversation I have with business leaders, and obviously local and central government folk as well. I think we have a great country. I think we have a fantastic country with huge potential, but I want us to do much, much better.
But how are you going to go faster than those countries?
Well, what I'm saying to you is that, you know, we know what we have to do to put in place the platform for New Zealand to drive more prosperity. It is education, it is science, technology, it is infrastructure, it is red tape, and it is international connections. That's our focus.
Can I circle back very quickly? Why are you being weird about how you TikTok? You're not breaching the government, the Parliament's rules, are you, and using TikTok on your...
No, completely followed IT advice and advice. Yep.
So I just want to jump back to charter schools.
Yes.
Would it be appropriate for Brian Tamaki's Destiny School to get taxpayer funding to become a charter school?
Well, again, we're still in the process of setting up charter schools. There'll be a whole bunch of criteria and obligations on charter schools. There'll be a whole process put in place to make sure that actually the school is one that we would support, and the school, most importantly, can deliver improved academic achievement and outcomes for its students. And so that's a process that is it's a bit hypothetical, to be honest, until we actually have all of the infrastructure in place to be able to make our assessments on which schools can be happy.
Nothing's stopping them though, is it?
Well, there may well be. Well, again, I'm not getting into that, but I'm just saying to you, we are investing in charter schools. It's going to be a feature of New Zealand's education system. We want the innovation in our education system. It's something that we believe in across our coalition government. And what you're saying is the beginning of funding to make sure that we can put that process in place.
I understand that David Seymour did mention previously that the Destiny School should become a charter school, but given Brian Tamaki's views and thoughts, do you think this is...
Well, I haven't followed that conversation. I'm not particularly, spending a lot of time focused on that at the moment. What I'm making sure is we get the structure and the foundations of charter schools set up in the right way, and make sure that we've got the right criteria and we've got the right assessment and the right processes in place.
And what would the budget be for businesses?
Sorry?
What would the budget be for businesses?
What do you mean by that?
Like, just what would the budget be for businesses?
What? Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Like, what would, I guess, the budget entail for businesses?
Well, again, what we're doing is, with respect to the budget, is making sure that we get on top of inflation. That gets interest rates down, that gets companies able to invest with certainty, that they know that they've got lower costs. As a result, that makes them grow. That's what drives our economic growth. That's what keeps people in employment. So, everything we're doing is gearing up to make sure that people in business can actually have certainty to grow their company and create opportunity for other New Zealanders. Everything we're doing is making sure we get more support into frontline services, whether it's health, education, law and order, to make sure that we're actually delivering the community outcomes we need to as well.
When State Highway 25 and the Coromandel reopened, you agreed with the journalist saying that it should be the blueprint for any repair job on a critical highway in New Zealand. Despite this, State Highway 1 in Northland has been closed since 2022, and the closure on the Bryn Derwins around the Mangamuka Gorge has just been extended. Why is State Highway 1 not being treated with the same urgency?
Well, again, what I was talking about there was actually the way in which local and central and national contractors came together, worked 20 hours a day, actually over 7 days a week, used standardised materials, standardised lengths, and it wasn't customised, and actually made use of their fast track provisions as well. And so it was a good example to me and gave me great confidence that we can actually get things done in this country when we choose to do so. Bryn Derwins is a particularly problematic piece of road, as you well know. We've committed to making sure that we can obviously invest in Warkworth to Wellsford and then come down from Whangarei, and we've also committed that we need to find an alternative pathway through the Bryn Derwins as well, because you're right, it's incredibly challenging, incredibly frustrating for the folk of Northland, and it's the lifeblood of the region, and yet it's very unreliable. But we need to find a pathway through that, and we need to find an alternative route.
Will you be offering offering compensation to affected businesses, given how long the closure's been going on?
Well, that's not a conversation we've had. What our focus is making sure we actually get an enduring, sustainable, long-term solution in place. So we've got good roads connecting Whangarei in the north actually to Auckland.
But if we're talking about supporting these communities, given, for the Auckland Light Rail, some of those businesses were given compensation, do you not think that they should also have that same support?
Again, hasn't been a conversation that we've had. What we're focused on is making sure everyone's doing everything they can to get those roads progressed as quickly as possible.
Why are you investigating a mega tunnel in Wellington while you're pausing roading projects like Brown Street and Christchurch, which is used by 45,000 people a day, and also State Highway 22 in Drury, which is the single biggest South Auckland transport project in the New Zealand.
Well, we're not saying that. As part of the roads of regional significance, which was the New Zealand nzherald program, which of course the last government managed abysmally, we're taking that fund of $6.54 billion. We're assigning that to regional roads, and it may well be that those two roads in particular, I'm aware of those roads, actually can get funded within this. But the immediate focus is making sure we get a real priority around the regional roads roads of regional significance, as we talked about and proposed.
But then why proceed with investigating a mega tunnel for Wellington? I mean, if there's no money, then there's no money.
Oh, well, no, we've said that's one of our roads of national significance that's on that program, and we're quite rightly looking at what the long-run tunnel would mean in terms of if it's 15 minutes less travel time, that's a good thing. We're only exploring that. We're looking at that as an option. That's what Simeon Brown's committed to doing.
Okay. Are you concerned about North Korea's alleged threat to New Zealand?
Yes, and New Zealand's played an important role in terms of surveillance and monitoring to make sure that we play our role. We stand up for a set of values in New Zealand about the international rule of law. We think that the nuclear program in particular in North Korea is clearly illegal, and it's important that we follow through with making our contribution in that way.
Very quickly. We have obviously the first painting or portrait of the king has come out, and we've had a few interesting, I guess.
Is this a News Hub story or is this a TVNZ story? Oh, wow.
And we just want to get your reaction on it. What do you think?
I think it's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's great.
Just another question, sorry.
Sorry, last one, yep.
In terms of the coalition agreement, what's the point of having an agreement to scrap COVID-19 mandates when there are none?
Again, what we've got there is an agreement to look at a broadening of the COVID-19 review. There are a range of issues that we want to explore. We've just finished consultation now. That'll be fed into a new expanded terms of reference, which we'll announce in the coming months.
So is that to, because I know that independently businesses and various GPs are still enforcing their own sort of mandates, if you will. Is that going to be looking at scrapping them? Well,
our focus is actually on just broadening the terms of the COVID investigation and making sure that we look at all aspects of it, economic and otherwise. And we've taken the consultation from the public. We've had a lot of feedback just closed out just recently in the last week. We'll digest all of that and be reflected in ultimately new terms of reference. Okay, thanks so much, Steve. Appreciate it. Take care.
Cheers.